Well, we're here tonight because they threw due process, fundamental fairness, and our Constitution out the window in the House proceedings. That's why we're here, because they started in the secret bunker hearings where the President and his counsel weren't even allowed to participate when they're trying to impeach him. Intel and Judiciary Committees was a one-sided circus. Ranking Member Nunes asked to call witnesses. He explained why in detail. It was denied by Manager Schiff. Ranking Member Collins asked to call witnesses. Denied by Manager Nadler. And that's what they call fairness. That's not how our American justice system works, and it's certainly not how our impeachment process is designed by our Constitution. The House took no action on the subpoenas issued to Mr. Duffy and Mr. Blair because they didn't want a court to tell them that they were trampling on their constitutional rights. So now they want this chamber to do it for them. The New Yorker reported, quote, once or twice a year he attended Burisma board meetings and energy forums that took place in Europe, end quote. When speaking with ABC News about his qualifications to be on Burisma's board, Hunter Biden didn't point to any of the usual qualifications of a board member. Hunter Biden had no experience in natural gas, no experience in the energy sector, no experience with Ukrainian regulatory affairs. As far as we know, he doesn't speak Ukrainian. So naturally, the media has asked questions about his board membership. Why was Hunter Biden on this board?
If your last name wasn't Biden, do you think you would have been asked to be on the board of Burisma?
I don't know. Probably not.
So let's go back and talk about his time on the board. Remember, he joined Burisma's board April 2014 while the United Kingdom had an open money laundering case against Burisma and its owner, the oligarch Zlochevsky. On August 20th, 2014, 4 months later, the Ukrainian Prosecutor General's office initiates a money laundering investigation into the same oligarch, Zlochevsky. This is one of 15 investigations into Burisma and Zlochevsky, according to a recent public statement made by the current Prosecutor General. On January 16, 2015, prosecutors put Zlochevsky, the owner of Burisma, on whose Hunter Biden sat on his board, on the country's wanted list for fraud, while Hunter Biden's on the board. Then a British court orders Zlochevsky's $23 million in assets be unfrozen. Why was the money unfrozen? Deputy Assistant Secretary Kent testified to it.
Somebody in the General Prosecutor's Office of Ukraine shut the case, issued a letter to his lawyer, and that money went poof.
So essentially paid a bribe to make the case go away.
That is our strong assumption, yes, sir.
He also testified that the Ukrainian Prosecutor General's office's actions led to the unfreezing of the assets. After George Kent's confirmation, that prosecutor was out. Victor Shokin becomes the Prosecutor General. This is the prosecutor that you'll hear about later, the one that Vice President Biden has publicly said he wanted out of office. In addition to flagging questions about previous prosecutors' actions, George Kent also specifically voiced other concerns, this time to the Vice President's office about Hunter Biden. In February 2015, he raised concerns about Hunter Biden to Vice President Biden's office.
In a briefing call with the National Security Staff of the Office of the Vice President in February of 2015, I raised my concern that Hunter Biden's status as a board member could create the perception of a conflict of interests.
But House managers didn't tell you that. This is all while Hunter Biden sat on Burisma's board. Did Hunter Biden stop working for Burisma? No. Did Vice President Biden stop leading the Obama administration's foreign policy efforts in Ukraine? no. In the meantime, Vice President Biden is still at the forefront of the U.S.-Ukraine policy. He pledges $1 billion loan guarantee to Ukraine, contingent on its progress in rooting out corruption. Around the same time of the $1 billion announcement, other people raised the issue of a conflict. As Obama administration special envoy for energy policy told The New Yorker, it raised Hunter Biden's participation on the board of Burisma. He raised it directly with the vice president himself. This is a special envoy to President Obama. And the media had questions too. December 8, 2015, the New York Times publishes an article that Prosecutor General Shokin was investigating Burisma and its owner, Zlochevsky. The Times report, here's their quote, the credibility of the Vice President's anti-corruption message may have been undermined by the association of his son, Hunter Biden, end quote, with Burisma and its owner, Zlochevsky. And it wasn't just one reporter who asked questions about the line between Burisma and the Obama administration. As we learned recently through reporting on Fox News, on January 19, 2016, there was a meeting between Obama administration officials and Ukrainian prosecutors. Ken Vogel, journalist for the New York Times, asked the State Department about this meeting. He wanted more information about the meeting, quote, where U.S. support for prosecutions of Burisma holdings in the United Kingdom and Ukraine were discussed, end quote. But the story never ran. Around the time of the reported story, January 2016, meeting between the Obama administration and Ukrainian officials took place, according to a Ukrainian press report, as translated, says, quote, the U.S. Department of State made it clear to the Ukrainian authorities that it was linking the $1 billion in loan guarantees to the dismissal of Prosecutor General Viktor Shokin, end quote. Now, we all know from the Obama administration and from the words of Vice President Biden himself, he advocated for the Prosecutor General's dismissal. There was ongoing investigation into the oligarch Zlochevsky, the owner of Burisma, at the time. We know this because on February 2nd, 2016, the Ukrainian Prosecutor General obtained a renewal of a court order to seize the Ukrainian oligarch's assets. A Kiev Post article published on February 4th, 2016, says the oligarch Zlochevsky is, quote, suspected of committing a criminal offense of illicit enrichment, end quote. Over the next few weeks, the Vice President had multiple calls with Ukraine's President Poroshenko. Days after the last call, on February 24th, 2016, a D.C. consultant reached out to the State Department to request a meeting to discuss Burisma. We know what she said because the email was released under the Freedom of Information Act. The consultant explicitly invoked Hunter Biden's name as a board member. In an email summarizing the call, the State Department official says that the consultant, quote, noted that 2 high-profile citizens are affiliated with the company, including Hunter Biden as a board member, end quote. She added that the consultant would, quote, like to talk with Undersecretary of State Novelli about getting a better understanding of how the U.S. came to the determination that the country is corrupt, end quote. To be clear, this email documents that the U.S. government had determined Burisma to be corrupt. And the consultant was seeking a meeting with an extremely senior State Department official to discuss the U.S. government's position. Her pitch for the meeting specifically used Hunter Biden's name. And according to the email, the meeting was set for a few days later. And later that month, On March 29, 2016, the Ukrainian parliament finally votes to fire the Prosecutor General. This is the Prosecutor General investigating the oligarch, owner of Burisma, on whose board Hunter Biden sat. 2 days after the Prosecutor General is voted out, Vice President Biden announces that the U.S. will provide $335 million in security assistance to Ukraine. He soon announces that the U.S. will provide $1 billion in loan guarantees to Ukraine. Now let's talk about one of the Democrats' central witnesses, Ambassador Yovanovitch. In May 2016, Ambassador Yovanovitch was nominated to be ambassador in Ukraine. Here's what happened when she was preparing for her Senate confirmation hearing.
Congresswoman Stefanik had asked you how the Obama-Biden State Department had prepared you to answer questions about Burisma and Hunter Biden specifically. You recall that?
Yes.
Out of thousands of companies in the Ukraine, the only one that you recall the Obama-Biden State Department preparing you to answer questions about was the one where the vice president's son was on the board. Is that fair?
Yes.
So she's being prepared to come before all of you, and talk about world issues. We're going to be in charge of the Ukraine. And what did they feel, the company that it was important to brief her on in case she got a question? Burisma. Ambassador Yovanovitch was confirmed July 2016 as the Obama administration was coming to a close. In September 2016, a Ukrainian court cancels the oligarch Zlochevsky's arrest warrant for lack of progress in the case. In mid-January 2017, Burisma announces that all legal proceedings against it and Zlochevsky have been closed. Both of these things happened while Hunter Biden sat on the board of Burisma. Around this time, Vice President Biden leaves office. Years later now, former Vice President Biden publicly details what we know happened: his threat to withhold more than $1 billion in loan guarantees unless Shokin was fired. Here's the Vice President.
No, I said, I'm not going to, or we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting $1 billion. I said, you're not getting $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Oh, son of a bitch. Got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid at the time.
What he didn't say on that video, according to the New York Times, this was the prosecutor investigating Burisma, Shokin. What he also didn't say on the video was that his son was being paid significant amounts by the oligarch, owner of Burisma, to sit on that board. Only then does Hunter Biden leave the board. He stays on the board until April 2019. Now, in November 2019, Hunter Biden signs an affidavit saying, quote, he's been unemployed and has no other monthly income since May 2019. This was in November of 2019. So we know from after April 2019 to May 2019 through November 2019, he was unemployed by his own statement. April 2019 to November 2019. Despite his resignation from the board, the media has continued to raise the issue relating to a potential conflict of interest. On July 22, 2019, the Washington Post wrote, the fired Prosecutor General Shokin, quote, believes his ouster was because of his interest in the company, end quote, referring to Burisma. The Post further wrote that, quote, had he remained in his post, he would have questioned Hunter Biden. On July 25th, 2019, 3 days later, President Trump speaks with President Zelensky. He says, the other thing, there's a lot of talk about Biden's son, that Biden stopped the prosecution, and a lot of people want to find out about that. So whatever you can do with this Attorney General would be great. Biden went around bragging that he stopped the prosecution. So if you can look into it, it looks horrible to me. End quote. The House managers talked about the Bidens of Burisma 400 times, but they never gave you the full picture. But here are those who did. The United Kingdom Serious Fraud Unit, Deputy Assistant Secretary of State George Kent, Chris Hines, the ABC White House reporter, ABC, Good Morning America, The Washington Post, The New York Times, Ukrainian law enforcement, and the Obama State Department itself. They all thought there was cause to raise the issue about the Bidens and Burisma. Now the House managers might say, without evidence, that everything we just have said has been debunked, that the evidence points entirely and unequivocally in the other direction. That is a distraction. You've heard from the House managers. They do not believe that there was any concern to raise here, that all of this was baseless. And all we are saying is that there was a basis to talk about this, to raise this issue. And that is enough. I yield my time.